Good evening, I'm Andrew Whitman in for Richard French. We'll head to Washington later to look at the big Supreme Court gay marriage case, but we begin 40 miles north in Baltimore, where things are tense as police in riot gear pack the streets for a second consecutive day. Karen Travers is live in Baltimore. She joins us now with the very latest as police are back on the streets, as are the protesters. Good evening, Karen.
Good evening. It is much quieter here today in Baltimore compared to this exact same time last night. There was a demonstration today, a very large one, near that CVS that burned down, but for the most part, it has been orderly. There is a heavy police presence throughout this city. Officers from nearby states and counties coming in to lend a hand to local law enforcement officials. And Maryland's governor was out and about across the city today, and he insisted the violence of last night will not be repeated.
Today in Baltimore, they're picking up the pieces.
Yesterday broke my heart. Today, I feel proud.
This West Side neighborhood was a scene of chaos overnight. Fires, looting, vehicles destroyed. Now residents here are coming together to clean up the broken glass and debris, trying to help local businesses get back on their feet.
We saw people coming together to reclaim our city, to clean our city, and to help heal our city. I think this can be our defining moment and not the darkest days that we saw yesterday.
Maryland Governor Larry Hogan walked through some of the hardest hit areas and promised things will be different tonight.
Criminal activity will not be tolerated. We're not going to have another repeat of what happened last night.
Strong words today from President Obama.
A handful of criminals and thugs who tore up the place.
He said what happened in Baltimore was not a protest.
When individuals get crowbars and start prying open doors to loot, they're not protesting.
Officials say overnight there were 144 vehicle fires, 15 structure fires. Around 500 Maryland National Guardsmen are supporting law enforcement officials in Baltimore. That number will increase to 2,000. Today, parts of Baltimore are shut down. City schools and the National Aquarium closed. The Orioles canceled their second home game in a row.
Officials are still urging folks to stay off the streets. Tonight at 10 p.m., a citywide curfew goes into effect. Reporting live from Baltimore, Karen Travers, ABC News. Back to you.
All right, Karen, thank you very much. A lot to unpack with the situation in Baltimore, and we have a terrific panel for it tonight. Nan Hayworth is back with us. She is a former Congresswoman, Republican from New York. Welcome back to the program. Dominic Carter is here, political journalist and author, as is C. Scott Vanderhoff. He is an attorney and former five-term Rockland County executive. Did I get that right? It's all,
you did.
It's all
you
fine.
did.
Okay, so let's start with the response, and I don't want to linger too long on the police response in Baltimore, but I think it bears some addressing and some consideration because there was a limited police response and police presence on the streets Saturday and Sunday, and things went peaceably. And then the city seemed somewhat underprepared and overwhelmed yesterday when all of this broke out. And Congresswoman, what was your reaction to the police and the police presence on the streets?
Well, there were failings in the police administration and the city administration of Baltimore, starting with the death of Freddie Gray. The city deserves answers. Freddie Gray and his family deserve justice. This is obviously a perpetuation of a wrong to have this kind of disorder in the streets in Baltimore because Baltimore's police department apparently was not activated appropriately to preserve public protection and safety. And this falls directly at the feet of the mayor and the administration in Baltimore. It
is an executive issue, Mr. County Executive, whenever you have the potential for a problem like that. Did you ever encounter anything that was, I mean, not on that scale, but an issue where you had to make the decision between, people's right to express their point of view or their anger versus public safety, and where do you draw that line? Where do you make the call?
Well, I mean, it's not an easy line to draw, and no, we had nothing like that. But I fault the governor as well because the National Guard was standing waiting there. I mean, they had a sense that this was out of control, was going to get out of control with the tweets they had. There should have been a much more active, proactive effort on both the governor's behalf. He said he was waiting for the call from the mayor. What is that? I mean, what was the mayor doing? She was saying with 2 hours before this broke all to pieces that she wanted everybody to be kind of calm. And I mean,
Space to destroy.
Yeah, they weren't prepared.
Live picture out of Baltimore, by the way, what appears to be a peaceful gathering of protesters and a line of police in riot gear as well. Scott, your point about the mayor and the governor, it bears mentioning that it's a Republican governor, it's a Democratic mayor. You wonder if some of that factored into it. Dominic, was your sense that the city just wasn't prepared or didn't handle this the right way?
The mayor definitely wasn't properly prepared. She made a number of tactical mistakes, but I do want to say this. I appreciate how the Congresswoman started out talking about what started all of this, the young man in the questionable death in police custody and so on. But as far as the mayor, and I do want to put this on the record, what a lot of people don't understand, because we've been down this road before, when there's an African American that's the chief executive of a city, in this case Baltimore, their hands, no one approves of the ignorance that occurred on the street last night in terms of the violence, burning your own community. It's going to be a very long time before you see that senior center back up, the CVS, and on and on and on. But African American mayors, their hands are tied a little bit to the degree that they know historically that the only way black people have ever gotten justice is by protesting. And so if they have the police crack down, they're naturally going against their constituency, their base. If you don't believe this, look at what happened to Dave Dinkins in Crown Heights. It's happened a number of times. So African American mayors, they may not ever admit this, they may not ever say it, but I've talked to some of them privately. And so they try and do a hands-off approach, but now the mayor's hand was called, and she must, the mayor and the governor, you could tell that they're not getting along with each other. It's really sad on a number of fronts. How do you tear down a senior center that was gonna benefit the elderly of your community? How do you do that, and why do you do that?
This is, I venture to say, Dominic, this is the end result of decades of failed urban policy. And it is a unique opportunity, if you will, for our African American mayors and administrations to demonstrate that they understand that people need to be able to have dignity of work. They need to be able to take responsibility for their actions. They need to be made not to feel that they are dependents on the state or the city, that they're powerless, and the only way they can express themselves is through violence.
But Nan, there's
That's
something
just
else
wrong.
here. A lot that what took place was by young people coming
Yes,
out of high school.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, that's outrageous. That's not
I
just.
agree with you.
Yeah, that's not urban policy.
But they're not governed. A lot of them come from homes that are broken.
See,
They don't
if we're going to be honest, we'll be here all night.
Yeah.
In terms of
We got a while.
In terms of looking at the problems of the black community. I mean, we can be here. You just mentioned it, Congresswoman. The broken family. Yeah. That's why that mother that was slapping her son upside the head. We don't approve of violence, but she's my hero.
Yeah.
Because she jumped out there and said, "You are not going to do this. How dare you?" And she put that young man in his place.
And we're showing that video on the screen now for people who haven't seen it. It's in the small box.
She's my hero.
She's we assume the mother of that high school kid who was part of the riots, and she basically jumped out and pulled him back home and said, "You're not doing this." Pretty embarrassing for the.
She's being a parent.
But we've touched on the other aspect of this story that I wanted to get into tonight, which is the root cause of what's causing all this, because this feels both similar and different from other incidents that we've seen going on. And we mentioned that the Orioles, they postponed tonight's game against the White Sox, and tomorrow they're going to play with an empty stadium. They did so because they're worried about the safety of the fans, and rightfully so. Lots of people scratching their heads trying to figure out how things have gotten so bad. But there was an interesting comment from the chief operating officer of the Orioles, John Angelos, and he wrote in part, "There's a far bigger picture for poor Americans in Baltimore and everywhere who don't have jobs and are losing economic, civil, and legal rights. And this makes inconvenience at a ballgame irrelevant in light of the needless suffering government is inflicting upon ordinary Americans." So there were certainly kids who just jumped ugly because this was the thing to do after school yesterday. There was certainly a lot of violence and a lot of anger over another black death at the hands of police
they
custody.
jumped ugly because they don't know any better. No one has taught them. And let's be honest, I come from a broken home. Daddy is not home. It's only a single parent. There are so many obstacles, and they don't know any better. And then when you add, I'm not making excuses, but then when you add that government has not been there in terms of the programs. And so when I hear these elected officials here tonight talk about the dignity of work, it's true. It's true. The dignity of getting up and having pride and having a job to go to every single day. And in the black community, that's a dying issue.
But how much
and when you have events like this happening in Baltimore, that makes it even worse. I'll bet that CVS isn't even going to come back. And these are African American owned businesses, African American employees who are being deprived, people in their own communities.
But I just want to step back a little bit, because I thought the police showed great restraint. And I don't know, I mean, you're being pelted with everything, and the lack of respect for police. I mean, yeah, there are bad police guys. We've talked about this before, but the lack of respect by the young people is something. How do you learn that?
Do they have community policing in Baltimore?
There is some community policing in Baltimore, but for the most part, it's been a hate-filled relationship between the community and police.
It seems to me there've been the Baltimore police force, the Baltimore Police Department has been criticized for years for being, I guess, both corrupt and
remember,
ineffective.
I mean, I'm just going to say the truth tonight, and I know there's some things that politically we shouldn't say, but in my community, young people were taught to hate the police, and perhaps for some good reasons. Hate is a strong word. And perhaps there's never a good reason to hate our police officers. Right, distrust. That's a better word. For police officers to put their lives on the line each and every day for us. But this is a mess, Andrew, and I don't see, I mean, think about that community center. Do you realize that these business leaders there had to be incentives, there had to be all types of things to get a CVS to come into the black community and open up this pharmacy. And this is what you did.
And the senior center was going to have low-income housing in it, too, so it really hurts the community in more ways than one.
And counseling services.
And you have a mayor who says, and now she's saying she couldn't possibly have been misquoted, and her words are plain. She probably didn't mean them that way, perhaps so, that there's a balance, and people who want to destroy need the space to destroy. That's basically putting a neon sign over Baltimore saying, by the way, if you want to protect your property, do not come to Baltimore.
But it sounds like there's some agreement among the four of us that a lack of economic opportunity in Baltimore, especially for this community, has either contributed to or helped cause the problems that we're seeing in the city today.
It does not excuse the thugs. No. Does not excuse the violence. It doesn't excuse those who purposely went out to hurt people. There's no excuse for that.
I'm not looking to excuse anybody, but I think we do a disservice if we don't try to figure out what the underlying issues are that leads to those people making such an uninformed, unintelligent decision.
Punish those responsible for this. Punish those who have done these misdeeds.
I agree, but I also think Dominic hits the point. And this is where the social discussion and policies have to change. How do you begin across the country, not just there, but White Plains, any place? How do you begin that discussion between the black community and the police force? Because this is not a lot. You can't do this in our country.
Well, there's also the economic conversation that I think we need to have, which is how do you extend better opportunities to these communities where it appears as though people feel like they have none? And let's be honest, one of the big problems in Baltimore is if you're young and black in Baltimore, you probably got a better chance of going to jail than you do of going to college.
The unemployment rate among young African American men is something like, it's at least double what it is it not, Dominic?
Yes.
Among white
But then come back again. Gangs were operating in this process.
Oh, absolutely. They take full advantage of this.
It's not just the social policy. You're dealing with people who are criminals, who do, and you got to recognize that in the midst of the social discussion.
No, you're absolutely right, but they're given fertile ground to cause this kind of mayhem because these young men and women, it's mostly young men here, obviously, do not have the opportunities that they should to live dignified lives.
Baltimore PD could learn something from the NYPD. I know we've had our problems in New York. Yes. And that's where I'm going with this, Andrew. In terms of, over 30 years, I've covered a number of high-profile funerals. And emotions are running high on day of funerals. So what this means is preparation. What the NYPD does is, let's say it's a black kid that was killed. They pull out many of the black officers from the Community Affairs Department. They wear the blue jackets. They pull out many of the Latino officers. They pull out the white officers that have a special skill in connecting with people. Now, you've got to be prepared for a riot. So what the NYPD does is they will have the police in riot gear maybe 8 blocks away. So you have no idea that they're there, in full riot gear with the horses and everything else. And all they have to do is put out a 1013 code over that radio, and here they come.
I got it, which helps mitigate, which helps minimize problems.
Yesterday,
I understand.
this wouldn't have happened.
Which helps minimize flashpoint incidents when they happen, and God knows there are going to be other incidents that happen, because it seems like every other week we're getting another report about a similar kind of police-involved death, and it seems like it's unjust. But I can't help but think that a lot of the fuel on this fire is the economic imbalance that we're seeing and the lack of opportunity. And that's not Baltimore. That's a lot of places.
But can I ask you a question?
Federal policy.
If you know that I went to school based on because the great taxpayers of New York State, they made it possible for me to attend college. So if I was able to get grants and go to school, see, the grants are there. Now you got to get up and apply for them. The grants are there. You can go to school in New York State right now if you desire to go to college. So when we're talking about a lack of economic opportunity, yes, but let's talk about the fact that some people don't want to get up and do the required work.
And most of these kids are unfortunately going to schools that have treated them with indifference.
Yes.
You know, they are victims in many cases of teachers' unions that have completely thwarted the efforts of people who really want to accelerate excellence, who want to reward teachers for going above and beyond and inspire these young people and give them hope and give them a background and the tools that they need so they can think about going to vocational school or college, whatever would work for them, but they don't get that.
Well, and that also speaks to the point that Baltimore is one of those towns where I guess the muscle jobs have gone away and they've never come back. The port industries in Baltimore are completely depleted. You had a lot of industrial jobs that have been gone for 2 or 3 generations now. And it just seems like we've never made, on any scale, national, state, local, whatever the scale is, we've never made another investment in trying to figure out what we do with people who used to have muscle jobs and are now not, those jobs aren't there anymore. Manufacturing jobs are gone.
They could be, but it would take, and it is possible to do, and smart people talk about this. It takes a complete turnaround in American policy toward business, toward manufacturing.
Well, yeah, and it requires a mayor and ultimately a governor to create the incentives to develop new types of businesses in these places for a whole new generation of people and a different generation of skill sets. And, you know, this is where being a mayor isn't just standing around, you know, nodding your head and getting applause. I mean, they should be working on economic development there. They should be doing all those brownfields that should be corrected. They should go into the communities and have police talking to people. I mean, there's all sorts of things. But you know what? We're talking about this because of a number of thugs still. However you look at this thing, you know, I was outraged at the behavior. Guys taunting the police. Look, there's a badness here. There's no question about it in terms of the police force and what's happened to the poor fellow, but it really is outrageous.
I totally agree with you, but if the conversation stops with the violence and with the criminal activity that was on the street, we've lost an opportunity for a needed and wider-ranging conversation.
Not we. It's that black community in Baltimore that's lost the opportunity. Because once the taunting of police officers start, America doesn't see your issue. America doesn't see the black man that was killed allegedly in police custody. America sees angry black young people that are running amok, and the system has to check them.
Yeah, but if the violence hadn't broken out yesterday, I don't know how much of this conversation we're actually having, because we're just talking about another police-related incident.
And that's what the president was saying from the White House today, and I agree with that. And we also have to deal with the issue of a number of black men that keep dying in police custody.
Very quickly, I think Governor Hogan of Maryland is speaking right now. We're just going to jump in and take a few moments with him.
Governor, do you think the mayor made a mistake by not asking you to deploy the National Guard earlier?
Look, you know, I don't want to point fingers at anyone. I'm not here to place blame. I'm here to try to solve the problem. I don't want to second guess the mayor's decisions. I know that she was trying the best she could. This was a difficult situation. The Baltimore City Police and Fire were doing the best they could. And when she asked us for help, we immediately responded. I know that it typically takes 8 hours to mobilize the Guard. We did it in 3 because we were already ready and we were prepared. We set up this Emergency Operations Center last Saturday. We prepared the executive order last Saturday. Our team has been in constant communication. We set up our command center. We've been working all week. We've been in communication with the city all week. Earlier yesterday, I talked with General Singh and told her to prepare the Guard and get them ready to be activated. So she took a lot of steps to get everybody teed up, kind of on the starting line, ready to act. When the mayor called, I signed an executive order 30 seconds later. The Guard was already on the way.
You said that you started getting ready last Saturday?
Well, we opened up the Emergency Operations Center here in preparation in case there was violence that broke out.
At the initial protest?
Yeah.
And in light of that, was there a point where you actually wanted to call in the Guard?
Look, I don't want to get into what happened before. Let's talk about what we're going to focus on in the future. Right now, we're trying to keep Baltimore City safe, we're trying to work the best we can with the city and provide as much support as we can.
All right, Governor Hogan out of Maryland live at a press conference talking about the response and why exactly it took as long as it did for the National Guard to hit the streets of Baltimore. This is, I think, is going to be the beginning of a long conversation in Maryland, some finger pointing going on between the governor's office and the office of the mayor of Baltimore. So that part of the story is just starting as we speak. We're going to take a quick break here on RFL. Up next, our other top story of the day. The U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments about gay marriage. Justices sounded pretty divided, so it's going to be a close one. We're going to debate the huge social and also the enormous political ramifications of this case.